Have you ever realized that the voice tearing you down isn't even yours? That the cruel thoughts in your head are echoes of someone else, not the real you? And what if I told you, until you confront it, it's silently controlling your life, your choices, your happiness? Today, we're uncovering whose voice is really speaking inside your head. You don't hear it out loud, but it's there the moment things go quiet. That voice in your head that says, "Why are you like this? You should be further by now. Don't get too excited. This won't last." And what's strange is it doesn't sound random. It sounds confident, familiar, like it knows you. You might think, that's just me being hard on myself. But I want you to pause right here, because this matters more than you realize. If that voice were truly you, it would want you to grow. It would guide you. It would correct you without tearing you apart. But this voice doesn't do that. It judges. It interrupts your peace, right when you start to feel okay. And here's the uncomfortable question most people never ask. Whose voice is that? Really think about it. The way it talks to you, the tone, the timing, the cruelty disguised as truth. Is that how you'd speak to someone you love? I remember reading a psychology paper years ago that said something chilling. Most people assume their inner voice is their identity, but neurologically, it's closer to an internal recording, a replay, which means that voice in your head didn't appear out of nowhere. It was learned, absorbed, repeated. And once you see that, because suddenly the problem isn't that you're weak or broken or too sensitive. The problem is that you've been living with a narrator who never wanted you to feel safe. Think about the moments when that voice is loudest, not when things are going wrong, but when they're about to go right. Right before you rest, right before you trust someone, right before you feel proud of yourself. That's when it steps in and says, "Careful, don't embarrass yourself." You know how this ends, and it feels protective, but it's not peaceful. Here's the truth most people never hear. That voice was formed during a time when you needed to survive, not thrive, when being small felt safer than being seen, when pleasing others protected you from rejection, when self-criticism felt like control. So no, you didn't choose this voice. And no, it doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It means you adapted. But here's where it gets dangerous, because the voice that once helped you survive is now quietly deciding how much joy you allow yourself to have. And if you never question it, you'll spend your whole life mistaking an old echo for your true self. So before we go any further, I want you to sit with this. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. And that difference, that tiny space between the two, is where your freedom actually begins. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine your mind as a room. Not just any room, but one that has been decorated over years, layer upon layer of furniture, paintings, sounds, and shadows. Some of it you chose. Some of it was placed there by others without you even realizing it. It's one of those pieces, a shadow on the wall shaped by someone else, but pretending to be yours. I remember reading a Zen parable about a student who complained that he couldn't control his anger. The monk simply told him, "You are not the river. You are the bank that holds it." Think about it this way. The river represents thoughts, judgments, fears. The bank is the observer, the part of you that can notice the river flowing without being swept away. That voice in your head is like the river. And too often, We confuse ourselves with it. This is not just philosophy. It's something modern science confirms. Psychologists call it the internalized critic. It's formed from all the moments in your life when someone's words, judgment, or indifference was louder than your own voice. Maybe it was a teacher who said, "You'll never be good enough." Maybe a parent who doubted you. Maybe a friend who mocked your dreams. Over time, those words became a tape you play on repeat. And the scary part, your brain begins to believe the tape is reality. Attachment theory explains this too. Your earliest relationships shape how you interpret the world and yourself. If care was conditional, if love came with judgment, your mind internalized a constant vigilance. It learned to protect you by criticizing you. It sounded harsh, but it was trying to keep you safe. And here's the tricky part. Your brain still thinks it's protecting you, even when it's sabotaging your happiness. Think about it. Every time you hesitate to speak up, every time you doubt yourself, every time you shrink just to feel safe, it's not weakness. It's old programming trying to prevent danger that no longer exists. And because the voice is so familiar, it feels trustworthy. But familiarity is not truth. I want you to notice this. The voice in your head is not your enemy. It's a messenger from a past version of yourself or someone else's past expectations, trying to guide you in the only way it knows. But here's the insight that changes everything. You don't have to take its advice anymore. Just recognizing that the voice is borrowed, inherited, conditioned, is the first step in reclaiming your mind. That's why the ancient wisdom and modern psychology meet here. Awareness alone creates a gap. And in that gap, you can start choosing which voices to listen to and which ones you let fade. You can separate the survival instructions from the guidance for growth. And that, more than anything else, is where transformation begins. Because when you realize the voice isn't truly yours, you start to reclaim space for your own. And that space, small as it may feel at first, is the beginning of freedom. Now that you understand whose voice has been speaking for you, the next step is learning how to respond to it. Because awareness alone isn't enough. You need action. And the first step is simple, but often overlooked. Identify the voice. I want you to really notice it the next time it shows up. Don't try to push it away. Don't argue with it yet. Just listen. What does it sound like? Is it familiar? Can you place it in your life? Think about it this way. Almost every critical thought in your head mirrors a real person from your past. Maybe it's a parent's harsh tone, a teacher's doubt, a friend who ridiculed your dreams. I remember reading a study where psychologists asked participants to trace critical self-talk to its source, and over 80% were able to link it back to someone else's voice, not their own. Recognizing that allows you to create distance. You start seeing the voice as something borrowed, not your true self, and that distance is crucial, because if you let it masquerade as you, it will continue to dictate your choices, your mood, even your sense of worth. Once you identify it, the second step is to question its authority. Just because the voice is loud doesn't mean it's right. Your mind has been wired to accept repetition as truth. That's why you hear the same criticisms again and again and start believing them. I want you to imagine this. A voice says, "You'll fail if you try." Before you act, stop and ask 3 questions. Is this voice kind? Is it true? Is it helping me right now? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. And in that realization, the power shifts. You're no longer a passenger. You're the driver. The final step is to install a new voice. Think of it like replacing an old software program that's no longer serving you. This isn't about pretending or fluff. It's about deliberate, compassionate self-talk. I want you to choose a voice that guides, that encourages, that speaks to you the way a wise mentor would. Start small. The next time you feel doubt, speak to yourself in that voice. Say, it's okay, you're learning. You're allowed to try. I remember reading a neuroscience study that showed people who practiced compassionate self-talk for just a few minutes a day began to literally rewire their brains within weeks. Neural pathways for self-criticism weakened and pathways for self-compassion strengthened. And here's the truth. It won't happen overnight. The old voice is familiar. It's comfortable in its cruelty. But with repetition, the new voice becomes the one your mind recognizes as safe. The one you listen to first. I want you to picture it like this. Every kind word you say to yourself is a brick. At first, it feels fragile, almost invisible. But over time, you build a foundation that the old voice can no longer shake. And that foundation is freedom. The freedom to make decisions, to love, to take risks, without being sabotaged. Echo. Question its authority. Then replace it with guidance, not judgment. That's how you reclaim the voice in your head. That's how you finally start listening to yourself, not the past. Now that you've begun noticing the voice in your head and questioning its authority, it's time to take the most important step, choosing the voice you actually want to listen to. This is where transformation happens. And it's not just a psychological trick. It's neuroscience, philosophy, and practice rolled into one. Think about it this way. Every thought you have is like a small spark. Left unchecked, those sparks feed the old tape, the critical voice, the internalized echo of someone else's expectations. But every time you speak to yourself with intention, with care, with reason, you ignite a different kind of spark, one that grows stronger every time you nurture it. I remember reading a study from Stanford where participants who practiced intentional self-talk for just 10 minutes a day showed measurable changes in their prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making, focus, and emotional regulation. In other words, their brains were literally learning to listen to a new leader. They think replacing the voice is about ignoring it or pretending it's not there, but that doesn't work. That old voice is familiar. It's ingrained. Pretending it doesn't exist is like trying to sweep a shadow out of a room. You have to acknowledge it, recognize it, and then gently redirect it. That's why the first step, identifying the voice, is so powerful. It creates a gap, a small space where freedom can emerge. And that gap is what allows you to introduce a new, intentional voice. One that speaks to you as a mentor, a friend, or even your future self would. Here's how you start. Begin by noticing the moments when the old voice is most active. Usually, it comes up in 3 patterns: fear of failure, fear of judgment, or fear of not being enough. The old voice thrives in these moments because it wants to protect you, or at least it thinks it does. But protection in this context is outdated. It's based on survival instincts from a time when being cautious was necessary, not from the present moment, where growth, creativity, and vulnerability are what you actually need. Next, speak to yourself deliberately, not with empty affirmations or generic positivity, but with clarity and compassion. I want you to imagine a conversation between yourself and your inner critic. Instead of arguing or ignoring it, try saying, I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me, but I'm choosing a different path now. Thank you for your concern, but I will guide myself from here. Think about it this way. You're not shutting down the voice. You're taking the role of a wise leader who listens, validates, and then decides what's next. Consistency is key here. I remember reading a study from Harvard where participants who rewrote negative self-talk into neutral or positive phrasing for just a few weeks reported significant reductions in anxiety and depression. Their brains literally started to associate challenges with growth rather than threat. Every intentional word you speak to yourself weakens the grip of the old voice and strengthens the pathways of your new chosen voice. It's important to remember that this isn't about perfection. You will still hear the old voice. It will still appear during moments of stress, uncertainty, or self-doubt. That's normal. What matters is how you respond. Every time you pause, notice, and redirect, you're training yourself. The gap between hearing the voice and believing the voice grows wider, and in that widening, you reclaim power. Another technique I want you to try is reframing. When the old voice says, "You're not enough," instead of immediately countering with a generic positive phrase, ask a clarifying question. Enough for what? According to whom? This simple cognitive step interrupts the automatic acceptance of the critical voice. It forces your brain to consider alternatives, to examine evidence, and to realize that the voice is not an absolute truth. It's a conditioned opinion, and that realization alone shifts your relationship with yourself. I also want you to create a library of voices you can rely on. Think about mentors you respect, people whose guidance resonates deeply, or even a wise version of yourself. When the inner critic appears, consciously bring that voice forward. Imagine how they would respond. What advice would they give? How would they interpret this moment differently? Over time, these chosen voices become familiar, comfortable, and authoritative, gradually replacing the old voice in your head. And here's the final insight that transforms everything. The moment you choose a new voice, you're no longer a victim of your past. The voice that once shaped your fears now becomes a witness, not a dictator. You are not your internalized critic, and you are not your past conditioning. You are the one who listens, evaluates, and decides. That's freedom, and it's available to you right now, so start small. Notice the voice. Question it. Speak with intention. Invite new voices in. Be patient, because rewiring the mind takes time, but it is possible. And as you do this, life begins to feel different. Decisions become clearer. Confidence grows. Anxiety softens. The world doesn't change immediately, but your experience of it does, because the narrative you're living in, the story you tell yourself, is finally your own. This is how you reclaim your mind. This is how you reclaim your life. And one day, when that old voice tries to speak, you'll listen, but you'll no longer obey. You'll guide it, not the other way around. That is the power of choosing whose voice lives in your head. And once you claim it, nothing can ever take it from you.